ire àtòhun tó dára. Ọmọ òmìnira bọ́ sípò ẹ̀tọ́ rẹ̀. Ìwọ ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo adúláwọ̀.
Ẹ ṣé púpọ̀. Ẹ káàbọ̀. A kí ọmọdé, a kí àgbàlagbà, a kí ọkùnrin, a kí obìnrin. Gbogbo yín náà la kí. Our speakers for today will be my brother Dayo and Arakunrin Olabola. Arakunrin Dayo, would you like to have the floor now, please?
Okay, good day, house. I greet everyone, anywhere you might be. Hope you had a fantastic day. Concerning the Itsekiris, there are many ties between the Yorubas and the Itsekiris that run deep. Some linguistic, some cultural, and some material culture. The Itsekiris speak a Yoruboid language known by the same name, also called Itsekiri. Now, the distinction between a language and a culture is a matter of semantics between a language and a dialect, because, so many things go into play to determine what exactly is a language and what exactly is a dialect. Sometimes it's political, sometimes it's, in a way, a dialects are also, can also be said to be languages. Let's take, for example, in Europe, right? There is this language known as Serbo-Croatian. If you go to Serbia and you ask the people there, what language do you speak? They'll tell you this, we speak Serbian. When you go to Croatia and you ask the people there, oh, guys, what language do you speak? They will tell you, we speak Croatian, right? But these two languages are virtually the same language, mutually intelligible. But as a result of the political division that has happened, due to the splitting apart of the country, which binded them all together in the past. I think it was, what's it called? Yugoslavia, All these languages now claim to be different things, even though originally they would have accepted that they were all the same, or at the least dialects of the same speech forms. So when you go to Croatia or you go to Serbia, even when you go to Montenegro and what's it called, some other countries like in that axis, they all speak the same language known as Serbo-Croatian language. The country I was about to, I didn't remember, was Bosnia. Bosnians also speak a language within that, speech format, but they all claim to speak. Anyway, the point I'm making is that what distinguishes a language and a dialect, can depend on a lot of things, part of which is politics. Now, Itsekiri, has been described by several linguists to represent one end of a Yoruboid speech form, right, stretching from the western reaches of the Niger Delta to as far as the Mono River in central Togo. So now, within those speech forms, you would have people who speak, I think we've spoken of them more than a few times here on this platform. They speak a dialect of Yoruba called Ife in central Togo. You would find these people, their chief city is called Atakpame. They also have other cities like Anye, Gubi, Kambole, and some other villages like that in central Togo. That represents the western end, of the Yoruboid languages. On the southeastern end, you would find the Shekiri speakers who live at the northwestern corner of the Niger Delta. So you'll find the Shekiris in the three Warri local government areas of the western part of Delta State. Although they call them Delta South, but geographically they are more of Delta West. You will find them in places like Koko. You would find them in places like Forcados. That would be their southern limit. You'll find them in places like Ugborodo, um, places like Jakba, Degele, and some other places, and as well as some little towns in Sapele local government. You would also find them in some enclaves within Uvwe and Udu local government, such as Ugbolokposo and some other places like that. Now, there is something called the Swadesh word list that linguists use to determine the extent of mutual intelligibility between languages or language forms. Now, what is this? What is the Swadesh word list? Um, the Swadesh word list is a compilation of some of the most basic words that linguists have discovered that over time these words do not really change that much as a result of influences of neighboring surrounding languages. So these are words that are endearing to people, right? That over time they do not really change. And this list contains also some basic words that are pertaining to things like nature, right? And that scientists have discovered that over time these words they don't really change that much. So when you go to two languages and you want to look at, okay, so how related are these two languages, you would compare words on this list. And the degree of similarity between any two languages, and when you come up with how similar two languages are, you will come out with a figure in figures in percentage to determine how linked those two languages or how interrelated they are. So you would find words like yes, no, good, bad, morning, afternoon, evening, father, mother, and some of those words on that Swadesh list. And on the analysis of the Swadesh list, Itsekiri was found to be most related to the southeastern Yoruba dialects, right? Because the Yoruba dialects or the Yoruboid dialects can be divided, into majorly speaking, three dialectal areas, or a Sprachbund. A Sprachbund is a geographical area in which various dialects are spoken in a continuum. Now, what is a continuum in linguistics? A continuum means an area or a speech area in which the two neighboring dialects would have interrelatedness that could be largely overlooked. So, let's say, for example, um, I speak a language which exists in a Sprachbund, right? The village beside me, or the next group beside me that speaks a language within that group, I would understand them very, very clearly. However, two people or two groups within that Sprachbund that speak dialects of that language that live on opposite ends would have difficulty understanding each other. A good example of that example is German, right? So low German speakers would understand to a very, very large extent people who speak Dutch in the Netherlands, right? But they would have a very, very hard time understanding people who speak High German in, maybe, say, for example, Eastern Austria. but due to the standardization efforts of German, they all now speak a central German language that is easy for everybody to understand. So that's a good example of a Sprachbund. Another good example is the Scandinavian languages. So they all have degrees of interrelatedness, right? A Dane can understand a Norwegian clearly. A Norwegian can understand a Swede. But let's say somebody in northern Sweden, which is at one extremity, and somebody in, say, maybe southern Denmark, they would still kind of understand each other, but it would be much harder comparing them to, the two groups that are directly beside each other, right? So I hope my example makes sense. So Itsekiri has been classified as linguist to represent one end of these language forms known as Yoruboid languages, and the closest relatives to the Itsekiri language are those southeastern Yoruba dialects. And now, when I say southeastern Yoruba dialects, people might think like, "Oh, what do you mean? Like, don't we all speak Yoruba language? Like, what are those southeastern Yoruba dialects, in particular?" So some of them include Ijebu, Ikale, Ilaje, Owo, Remo, Ondo town, and some Akoko towns. These are all described to be towns which speak southeastern Yoruba dialects. So the highest interrelatedness between any, of these southeastern Yoruba dialects and Itsekiri would be Ikale and Ilaje, which share the highest amount of mutual intelligibility with Itsekiri at, I think, around 83% of the words being the same, based on the Swedish word list analysis. Culturally speaking, some of the other similarities that exist between Ishekiris and the Yorubas include things like veneration for Ifa, which the Ishekiris, by the way, they call Ife. So when they want to consult Ifa in Ishekiri, they will say Ife Bibi. Ife Bibi means like asking Ifa. So in Yoruba, we would say Ifa, Afelo Bifa, Afelo Tefa, or something like that. In Ishekiri, they will say Ife Bibi. There is also the other commonalities in traditional religion, including veneration for Ogun, the god of war and metal workers, and so many other things. Some river deities like Olokun, which they call I think they call that Umalokun or Umalokun, which would be Umaleokun or Imaleokun, which is like maybe the deity of the deep or the deity of the sea, and these are some of the deities in the Shakiri land which they hold in the highest esteem. But that nowadays, due to the influence of Christianity and the imported religions, both on the Yoruba side and the Shekiri side, we've seen like a waning of some of the reverence for this, primordial deities that we've always held in high esteem between both of us. I would not want to speak for too long at a stretch because I know there are other speakers, and I know people, along the course of my speaking may have come up with like different questions that they would like to ask. So, I would like to yield the mic right here. I think it's a good point to yield the mic to the next speaker. Thanks, Mr. Abami, and everyone on stage.
Thank you so much, my brother. Really appreciate that. My brother Olabola.
Yeah, Mr. Vami. Maybe he wants to take some question first. Come on, long
All right,
break.
all right,
Yeah.
that's okay. We can
Oh,
do.
okay, yeah, that would be cool as well.
Yeah. Tó bá ní ẹni tó ní ìbéèrè, please, if you have questions or comments, please flash your mic and we can take your questions. And if you're in the audience, you would like to speak, I just turn on the hand raising function to everyone. Please kindly indicate and we can bring you up to speak. Any questions? or should we be asking questions now? Okay, someone. I just brought someone up.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Please go ahead.
So, Mr. Dyer, thank you very much for that knowledge. Can you? So, I'm from Ekiti State. So, when you're categorizing, sorry about guys, I'm sorry, I'm walking on the street. So, when you categorize Ekiti language, so what part of Yoruba does that fall? Like, would that be Southwest, Southeastern Yoruba, South, whatever? Like, just expatiate more on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, my kitty brother. Shala Nishio. Yeah.
I don't know how to speak. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, thank you so much. My brother, Ifedayo. Please can you take that?
Okay, so Ademola, the Ekitis as a people, they speak a central Yoruba dialect, together with other dialects such as Igbomina, um, Yagba, Ijesha, Ife, and Akure. You know, all these areas speak forms of Yoruba which are considered central. So, what do they mean by central? They mean central Yoruba means a transitional area between the northwestern Yoruba, spoken majorly in Oyo and Egba and other areas to the west, and the southeastern dialects such as Ikale, Ilaje, or Wo. So they share morphological and linguistic features with dialect in these two areas. So why you will find differences between, let's say, for example, Ekiti or Ijesha, and Oyo, they would also have similarities that they share. And on the other way too, they would share similarities with dialects on their east, such as Ikale and Ondo, and also they would also have some differences. So, speaking to your question, the Ekiti speak a central Yoruba dialect, which it's like a transitional area between between the northwestern and the southeastern forms of Yoruba. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my brother Demola and my brother Dio. Fred, please go ahead. Fred, I can see you're flashing your mic. Please go ahead. I think Fred has got really bad internet. We can't hear Fred. Fred, please go ahead, Fred. Fred, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. My sister Lovette, do you have any questions or do you need any clarifications or comments? It's really good to have you. At least we can have a balanced view of the subject. My sister Lovette.
I'm still listening for now, and when I do have a question, I will let you guys know. I'm learning some new things regarding the culture, but I'm still listening for now.
All right, thank you so much. Do we have any other questions or comments? No. All right, my brother Ola, please go ahead.
All right, thanks, Mr. Bami. Mr. Dayo has done a wonderful job with the linguistic aspect of things. In fact, I've learned my jotter is full here. I was taking down notes as he was going with that. So, the synopsis of what I would like to talk on is just four things I just want to highlight. So maybe I'll take two or three first, and then the other ones later. So I want to talk about the settling of the Hishekiri people in the light of modern knowledge. What scientific knowledge has to say in terms of how they came to settle in that part of Nigeria that they are now, as you can see on my DP if you PTR. So, and then I would move to the testimony of the Shekiri people themselves. What do they say about themselves today and yesterday, to the extent that we can know if we extrapolate back into the past? And then I will talk about the local traditions, like what is their oral history, What does it say? And from this oral history, what has historians concluded from that oral history? And by historians, I mean those professionals, those academics that examine all of the evidences and see what is closer to the truth. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is I just want to make some comment on the present succession issue to the throne of the Olu of Warri. So I'm going to start with the settling. So, like the settling of most people, the Yoruba as a whole, the Igbo, the Nupe, like I used to do in my talks. So, modern knowledge says that all these people first emerged for the first time, prior to which there was nothing like that. For the first time, they emerged as an ethno-linguistic group somewhere around the Niger-Benue confluence. I did PTR that sometimes ago in my last talk, and I just PTR'd that again now. So if you look at the PTR, if you see the Nigerian region, you would see the Niger River and the River Niger and the River Benue, Odoya, Atikeji, Odo, Chada. So that area that is circled, that's the region around the Niger Benue confluence, where these people, Yoruba, Igbo, Nupe, etc., where they first emerged as different, distinct ethno-linguistic groups. So after the emergence in this area, what happened? They spread out. So the Yoruba spread out towards the south and towards the west. It wasn't that like they all moved in one direction to one place. No, they spread out. They radiated. Different historians will use different terms just to capture the essence of the spreading. Like it's not just one movement. So it wasn't from that place to one location, all to different locations. So the Yoruba went southward, westward. They went southward until they reached the Atlantic area, and they went westward until they reached somewhere around the present-day Togo. And then other people spread like that too. The Igbo spread eastward and southward, and so on. So the Shekiri people occupy the southeasternmost point of where we can call Yoruba land, as you can see on the new map that I just PTR now. If you look towards the southeast, you would see those people. So how do historians regard the Shekiri people then? So the Shekiri people, after having spread out from the Niger-Benue confluence with other Yoruboid groups, some historians would argue Yoruba group, some would say Yoruboid. I would differentiate. It's just a slight differentiation between those two terms, Yoruboid and Yoruba. So let's use the term Yoruba for now, but I would explain later. So all these Yoruba groups spread. There was no subgroup at that time. There was nothing like Ijebu when they were spreading, nothing like Ishekiri, nothing like Ondo, nothing like Ife. It was just one identical Yoruba group or Yoruboid. So it was until they had spread for thousands of years, though, and occupied all their present locations that they started having different internal differentiations now. So one Yoruba subgroup emerges amongst the whole Yoruba group. So you have the Ijebu, you have all other subgroups like that. So with these subgroups, their dialects are formed in terms of the language side and some differentiation in their cultural element a little bit. But then there's still a lot of things that binds them together as Yoruba or Yoruboid. So yeah, so this is the settling of the Ishekiri. But why do most linguists or historians refer to Ishekiri as Yoruboid rather than a Yoruba subgroup? So this differentiation is because of the fact of their location. So they are located in such a place that they are quite removed from the Yoruba, the other Yoruba groups. They are quite surrounded by other groups, and then as a result of this, they have absorbed into themselves various other linguistic and cultural elements from Edo, from Urobo, from Ijo, for example. So they are originally a Yoruba stock, but over a long time they've settled in such a place that caused them to have absorbed other linguistic and cultural elements. So some scholars would say, in this sense of the fact that they have had this kind of uniqueness of resulting from having absorbed from all these other cultural and linguistic elements, they almost qualify as another language on itself, as another subgroup on itself, rather than a subgroup of Yoruba, and rather than a subgroup of Yoruba language. So some scholars will say Yoruboid, meaning that it is Yoruba in some sense, but it's also different from Yoruba in that it has absorbed other cultural and linguistic elements over the course of time, based on resulting from the fact of its location. So that is that about the settling of the Shekiri people. So in that sense, they are Yoruba people. What do Shekiri people say about themselves? Do they think they're not Yoruba in present time? So I'm going to be reading from, when the British and the Europeans came to the Nigerian region. It wasn't Nigeria at then though. So they wanted to know about these people whom they want to conquer. So they took notes carefully, asked questions from these people. Who are you? They did their homework very well. And they did ask questions to all these people. For example, the Shekiris. Who are you people? What do you say about yourself? So I'm going to be quoting from the testimony of a British traveler whose name is H.L. Galway. So Galway, this is Galway's eyewitness account from the Shekiri people, sometimes in the 1890s. So quoting from the eyewitness account of Captain H.L. Galway, in his article that was published in the Geographical Journal, the article is entitled Journeys in the Benin Country. So Galway writes, let me now refer briefly to the tribes that people this part of the world. First, we come to the Jakris, and this is his own rendition of the word, the local indigenous word Shekiri. First, we come to the Jakris, who are connected in race and language with the Yoruba people. And these are the two things that actually make an ethnic identity: the linguistic component and the ethnic component. So, I mean, people could be other than a different ethnic group, but speak the same language by virtue of the fact that they've been here for a long time and they've absorbed that language. But here they're not just connected in terms of language, they're connected in terms of race, the ethnicity. So it's a Yoruba thing through and through, except with the exception of the fact that they're located in a place that allows them to have drawn input from other people. So he said, first we come to the Jakris, who are connected in race and language with the Yoruba people, extending from the Mahin country on the west to the Forcados on the east, and inland about as far as Sapele. End of quote. Reference H.L. Galway, Journeys in the Benin Country, West Africa. The Geographical Journal, Volume 1, Number 2, February 1893, page 127. Another eyewitness account from the 1800s, but this was published, it wasn't published until 1903, a few years after. So this can be found in H. Lingroth's book. And he writes, another eyewitness account collected from the Shekiris themselves, their own account. H. Lingroth writes, in this respect, however, the officials, that is the British officials, the officials agree with the tradition of the people at Warri, the Jekris, who claim, so this is the Jekris people's claim, the Jekris who claim, give me a second, to come from the west. I'm going to read that one more time. In this respect, however, the officials agree with the tradition of the people at Warri, the Jekris, who claim to come from the west. So this are the testimonies from the Shekiri people themselves, claiming, oh, we're connected in race and language to the Yoruba. Oh, we come from the west. If we look at the map here, we see Shekiri in the southeastern corner, and the only place to the west, or at least roughly to the west if you're not thinking of the ocean, is Yoruba land. So this is what they say about themselves. They say they are Yoruba people. I'm going to read one more testimony, and this is in the 21st century, the last Olu of Warri, Ogiame Ikenwale. He said the following words when he was acknowledging people who were present at his coronation. So I'm quoting. He said, all royal fathers present, led by His Imperial Majesty Oba Adeyeye Ogunwusi, the Ooni of Ife, who defied all permutations to personally attend the coronation, barely a few days after he himself ascended the ancient throne of our father Oduduwa. So these are the testimonies of the Shekiri people themselves telling us who they are. So as regards the settlement, they came as regards the settling, they came from the Niger Benue Confluence and then came as a Yoruboid group or Yoruba group, as some historians will put it, and then they settled in this part of the world and absorbed inputs from other cultures over time, such that they almost have a unique identity, and that makes it look to some people like, oh, it's different from Yoruba, but in the real sense, it's actually a Yoruba subgroup. And we've heard the testimonies of these people, saying we come from the West, saying we are connected not only in language but also in race with Yoruba particularly. One more thing I want to add before I'm gonna stop talking is how they address their king. So we're gonna get to how the kingdom of Ode Itsekiri was formed. That's their central kingdom. Ode Itsekiri, just like other Yorubas around the south would use Ode, also Ode Ondo, and some other Odes like that. So this is how some Yoruba kingdoms in some regions, some of those that Mr. Dayo mentioned, would prefix their capital with the word Ode. And sometimes they suffix it with Ode. So it could be prefix, it could be suffix. So Ode is a word used amongst some Yorubas to describe the premier city of their king. So they say Ode Ondo, they say Ode Shekiri, they say Ode Ijebu or Ijebu Ode. So other parts of Yoruba land use other words like Ile, Isheri Ile for the Eko people, or Yo Ile, Ile Ife, and so on and so forth. So these are just words that we use to describe the most important city in that kingdom. So for their kings, they use the word Olu and Ogiame. Olu is a pure Yoruba word, and Ogiame is a pure Edo word. So I would examine the Edo connection with the Shekiri people, but we see who these people are when they settled. So the settlement comes first before the kingdom. So they had a settlement before they formed a kingdom. So in the second half of my talk, I'm going to talk about, okay, now after the settlement, how did they form the kingdom? So the Edo connection did not really come in. The Edo connection to their monarchy did not really come in until when the kingdom was to be formed. But they are settled there for thousands of years before the formation of kingdom. So when they formed their kingdom, they called their kings by two nouns, just like all Yoruba kingdoms call their kings by two nouns, a proper noun and a common noun. The common noun just describes him, just like I would call a lady, I would call them woman. That's a common noun because they are women and there are other women like that. But the proper noun is that noun that identifies that woman uniquely. So in a similar sense, Yoruba kingdoms have these two nouns that describes their monarch. One will call the monarch by the word that translates roughly to king or premier. So this is a common noun because if I say king, there could be many kings. In addition to having this word, this common noun from that language, the Yoruba kingdoms would also have one word that uniquely identifies the kind of king we're talking about. So for the king of Ife, it would have this unique word that identifies him and says Ooni. So we usually call this the title. So he is king, Yoruba, Oba, and he is Ooni, identifying which Oba are we talking about. Is it the one from Oyo? And so on and so forth. So he's Ooni as well as Oba. In Oyo, he's king. But then this king has a unique name, title identifying him. He is Oba, yes, king. But which king are we talking about? The Alaafin. So Alaafin is the word that uniquely identifies him. So in a similar vein, the Shekiri has the word, the proper noun, and the common noun. So the common noun here is the Yoruba word Olu, which roughly translates to king, just like Oba. Oba too roughly translates to king, but doesn't literally convey king. Oba would literally means the overlord, the one who lords over. So Olu would roughly translate into king, but would literally mean the premier, the first among the rest, the most important among the rest, the premier. And then it has this unique word that identifies him, and this one unique word comes from the Edo component, and we'll talk about the Edo connection later. So that word is the Ogiame. So it has the two common noun and the two nouns, the common noun and the proper noun, just like other Yoruba kingdoms. So I'm going to stop here for now. Thank you.
Ola, just a quick addition to what you just said. The Shekiris actually identify their king by three nouns: Olu, as you said, Ogiame, as well as Oba. But the thing is, the term Oba does not enjoy as much usage as the two earlier terms, Olu and Ogiame. But there are some Aboriginal communities among the, which I know you're about to talk about in the second part of your, of your lecture. But there are some Aboriginal communities among them that refer to the king as Oba. One good example is Omadino. So Omadino claims descent from the Ijebu people, direct descent from the Ijebu people, right? I will talk about that as well. Which town in particular they pointed to as the origin and all that. But they claim descent from one particular king known as Lenua, right? And Lenua was a king that they know as Lenua Obaode. So when they have an annual celebration in Nomadino, which is one of the original communities they have down there, that celebrates, the foundation of the village or the town from the king known as Lenua Oba Ode. So they call the king Oba, they call the king Olu, they also call the king Ogiame. And as we can all see, the recent you know coronation rituals going on in Warri, the Shola Emiko, has been various times been referred to by the Shekiris themselves as Omoba. So that's like the crown prince in waiting. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that addition. Thank you. Mr. Bami Shewambe.
Moabi, do you need something? Emma
Yeah,
Baton
if we have questions before Mr. Dayo takes over.
Okay.
Yeah.
That banquet chief, need question. Chief, you can ask your question. At Mr. Fulusho. Chief, you go next. Chief, you can ask your question. Or are you clapping?
Joshua and Besha.
Is
Hello,
there?
Emma, mo ti gbà pé mi ní jẹ́ chief, ẹ má bínú. Hello.
Boy, you, Chief. Okay,
Eh,
Chief Michael Falade. Every
ẹ
chief
má
Zaju
cast me
orúkọ
now.
Okay, we are.
Okay, so mo kí gbogbo wa táwa ní room yìí. This is Itsekiri. I like the topic because ó jẹ́ nǹkan tẹ́ pé mo ti máa ń wonder tẹ́lẹ̀ pé how does it tẹ́ bá lọ wo list of kings of Itsekiri. So the last time mo Google, sorry, so Wikipedia wà ní Wikipedia ẹ máa rá àwọn orúkọ ọba bíi Àbẹ̀joyè, àwọn some of those titles or bóyá names ẹni they are direct wọ́n ní direct Yorùbá meaning. Then àwọn orúkọ tó ń jẹ́ náà tẹ́ bá rí, for instance now a typical Itsekiri name is Halero. Now I asked an Itsekiri lady pé because Halero has okay in Ekiti there's something, Ale means land. It's just like Ile in Yoruba. So if you say Halero, it's like soft soil or soft ground. And I asked that lady that was the meaning of Halero in Shekiri, and guess what? She said fertile land. So all like the same meaning. So but more I noticed some of the Ishekiri people to meet. The bá dé orúkọ tó ń jẹ́ náà bíi pé kó máa jẹ́ Ọmáṣọlá, kó máa jẹ́ òrìṣà ṣe kínní kan, but àwọn máa ń sọ fún mi pé àwọn kì í ṣe Yorùbá. So irú ìdánilẹ́kọ̀ọ́ yìí were very very important. Like in fact mo wish gan ká nípa àwọn some of the Shekiri friends mo ní ká ní wọ́n wà ní clubhouse mo máa ping wọn wọlé kán wá listen. So ẹ kúṣẹ́ takuntakun lóòtú. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
Okay.
Chief Falade, just a little bit more input on those names you mentioned. Alero. Yeah, you're right. You know, in Yoruba, Alero would mean the soil or the ground is soft, right? So in Ishekiri culture, Alero is usually a name given to first daughters that are born to a family. So let's say, for example, I just started out with with my family, and I just had a baby girl. I would name her Alero, or if I don't name her Alero, I would name her Urowoli, which means softness or ease has entered. Urowoli. Or if I don't name her Urowoli, I would name her Orode, which also means softness has come. So it's either I name her Alero, which means soft ground, or Urowoli, which means softness has entered, or Orode, which means softness has come. So it's a custom that when you give birth to a baby girl, the softness, it's a kind of like the way we are with our names. Most of our names have meanings, and these names are kind of like prophecies and prayers. So you're kind of saying, oh, this little baby girl that has come, I'm naming her Urowoli because I have the belief that from here henceforth, blessings and softness and ease are going to be ours in this family. So those are the names usually that are reserved for first daughters that are born in Ishekiri families, and they all have the same meaning, but just in various ways. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Okay,
Okay,
that's nice.
Ache, thank you.
Okay, Chief, Mr. Funshaw, you can go next, sir.
ẹ ṣe nǹkan máa tiẹ̀ rú mi lójú ó ní pé ṣe mọ̀ tẹ bá wo àwọn connection àwọn ọba kan ẹ máa gbọ́ bí irú Oníkòyí lẹ́kọ̀ọ́ Oníkòyí kan náà ní àwọn Oníkòyí àwọn Ìkòyí ilé àwọn other kinní yẹn they are all connected because of bóyá ogun àbí nǹkan tó kó wọn débì kan ìjàyè bí ìjàyè bíi mẹ́ta ogun tó pín wọn kiri Òwu orílẹ̀ Òwu Olówu yẹn náà ni wọn ò bá jẹ́ Òwu Ìjẹ̀bú wọn á ṣàṣe but ìkan wà ó ní pé Olú bólú ṣe ń jólù yìí mo mọ̀ pé Ọlábọ́lá sọ ń pẹ̀ ń sìn but kò ó rú mi lójú because Olú Ìlarò wà Olú Ìkẹjà wà which are bíi Àwórì làwọn o ṣóyé yín so báwo ṣé àbí kí ni connection tó fi jẹ́ pé Olú ni àwọn yẹn so ẹ jẹ́ bá mi ẹ là mí lóye díẹ̀ o.
Ó dàbí pé ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Ọlábọ́lá máa bá wọn fèsì nìyẹn.
Yeah, so Olú tẹ́ ń gbọ́ káàkiri yẹn ìdí tẹ́ ṣe ń gbọ́ náà ni pé torí wọ́n gbogbo wọn tó ń sọ jẹ́ Yorùbá èdè wọn ló ń sọ. Wọn ò ní láti jẹ́ kí wọ́n move wá láti ibì kan sí ibì kan. They are just speaking their language. So tó bá yẹ pé English people ló tẹ̀dó sí gbogbo Nàìjíríà yẹn tó dẹ̀ ń jẹ́ èdè English ni wọn, ẹ máa gbọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ kan ní part kan of Nigeria, ẹ máa gbọ́ the same ọ̀rọ̀ lápá ibòmíì. Kò mean pé àwọn tápá ibì kan ló move lọ sápá ibòmíì, wọ́n kàn ń sọ èdè ìlú wọn ní English. So the same way náà lẹ fi rí tí Olú wà ní Ṣẹ̀kírì, èdè wọn ló ń sọ ló sọ pé Olú. Èdè wọn ló ń sọ nígbà tó ń sọ pé ọba, èdè Yorùbá ló kàn ń sọ, that's their natural language. So tẹ bá rólú ní Ìkẹjà, tẹ rólú ní Ìlarò, èdè wọn ló kàn ń sọ, èdè ìlú wọn ni. Àwọn míì wà wọ́n lè move lọ lóòótọ́ but kò necessary pé nítorí wọ́n move lọ fi ń sọ. Whether they move or not, èdè wọn nìyẹn, èdè Yorùbá nìyẹn, so they would say it. So tẹ bá gbọ́ ọba ní Ọ̀yọ́, tẹ gbọ́ ọba ní Ìjẹ̀bú, kì í ṣe dandan pé Ọ̀yọ́ yẹn ló move lọ Ìjẹ̀bú. Oníkálùkù ń sọ èdè Yorùbá tó jọ pa wọ́n pọ̀, ọba ni. So tẹ bá gbọ́ ọba ní Ṣẹ̀kírì, tẹ gbọ́ ọba ní bóyá Oǹdó, èdè wọn ló ń sọ, Yorùbá náà ló pa gbogbo àpọ̀. Wọ́n lè wá ní dialect tó differentiate lọ́wọ́n ibì kankan but nǹkan tó so wọ́n pọ̀ rẹpẹtẹ, just like pé Mr. Dayo ṣe sọ pé àwọn nǹkan tó ń so wọ́n pọ̀ ní bó ṣe máa ń check there is a common language. So yẹn ló ṣe jẹ́ pé ethno-linguistic group kan ṣo ni wọ́n, ethnicity yẹn ìkan náà, language yẹn ìkan náà. Nínú language lẹ ti máa rí dialect differentiation kéékèèké, but differentiation yẹn ò wá pọ̀ enough to now throw them off from that subgroup. Tí differentiation yẹn bá ti pọ̀ jù, wọ́n máa di group míì ní entirely. So differentiation yẹn is just sufficient enough to call them a subgroup of that language. So it's just their language, it is natural. And àwọn ọ̀rọ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ pọ̀ tán fi ń describe ọba nílẹ̀ Yorùbá. Tí n bá rántí wọn dáadáa, mo ti rí nínú ìwé kan bí wọ́n máa ń lo àwọn tó fẹ́ẹ̀ dà pé ó pẹ́ jù, Ọ̀ṣìn nínú àwọn nǹkan tó fi ń describe wọn pé èèyàn jẹ́ leader, ó ń rule nìyẹn, ruler, leader, Ọ̀ṣìn. Wọ́n ń lo Olú, leader, ruler náà ni. Wọ́n ń lo Ọba, leader, ruler náà ni. So gbogbo nǹkan tá à ń sọ èdè Yorùbá la kàn ń sọ. Àwọn kan bí kan ń lo Elé, pé Elé ń ṣe kinní kan, Elé so leader, ruler náà ni gbogbo èdè Yorùbá ni. So táwọn kan bá move, yes, language yẹn náà move tẹ̀lé wọn, but they don't have to move for us to find these words in different parts of Yoruba land. Why? It is just their language. Bí irú Ìkòyí yẹn, for example, tẹ̀sán sí, mo gbọ́, in fact, ó jọ bí ẹni wípé kì í ṣe Ìkòyí tọ̀yọ́ yẹn ni Ìkòyí ti Èkó. Ó súnmọ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ gan-an, ó súnmọ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ gan-an. In fact, mi ò tí ì rí evidence yẹn, I don't know, maybe ó wà, but gbogbo nǹkan tí mò ń rí show wípé it's a different Ìkòyí, it's a different one entirely. Inú àwọn ọmọ Ọlọ́fin Èkó tí wọ́n pín àwọn Ìdẹ́jọ, tí wọ́n pín different parts of the island fún, àwọn Ọlọ́fin yẹn dẹ̀ ti wà tipẹ́ níbẹ̀ yẹn. Kò ń ṣe àwọn tó ṣẹ̀ move later ní 18 something tí ogun tú Ọ̀yọ́ ilé ká, later ni ìtàn wọn tútúká yẹn ṣẹ̀ ṣẹlẹ̀, but àwọn eléyìí ti wà ńbẹ̀ yẹn. So àwọn ọmọ Ọlọ́fin yẹn ni tán jẹ́ pé land owners, so àwọn ló pín ilẹ̀ fún pé ó yá, Oníkòyí gbogbo wọn, wọ́n gba ilẹ̀, àwọn Ìdẹ́jọ ni, Arómiré gbogbo wọn bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn, Ìdẹ́jọ ni gbogbo wọn. So èdè wọn lọ́kàn ń sọ, so ẹ máa bá díẹ̀díẹ̀ pàdé tẹ́ ṣe bá ń bí ẹ tún máa rí ń bòmí, but wọn míì movement ló fà, tán bá lọ wọ́n á move pẹ̀lú èdè wọn, but wọn míì they don't have to move. Mo hope pé mo simplify ẹ̀.
So ẹ mà ṣeun, mọ̀ pé nǹkan bá rúyàn lójú nígbà tí máa ń gbọ́ Olú yẹn, máa ní Olú Ìkẹjà, Olú kìíní, òótọ́ ló tún bí bóyá òun náà lolú Ìṣẹ̀kírì, but inú mi ti ẹ̀dùn fún Ìṣẹ̀kírì pé bíkan wọn ṣe lọ, bí ọ̀gbẹ́ni Ìfẹ́dayọ̀ àti Ọlá bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe sọ yìí, inú mi dùn, because a gbọ́dọ̀ ó ṣe kókó ká mọ̀ bá a ṣe tán káàkiri, èèyàn gbọ́dọ̀ mọ bá a ṣe tán, a gbọ́dọ̀ kóra wa jọ, or maybe I should say it in English for people who we understand. We have to know how we're connected, how we're related and all, so that at the end of the day, I'm not going to be looking at Itsekiri as yes, they are nation on their own, they can stand, but they are part of the Oduduwa nation, or part of the Yoruba nation, so that I will see them as part of me. Now I see the Benin Republic, Yorubas as part of me. Àti ọ̀sẹ̀ bí àbí àjàṣẹ́ ṣe báwọn làjàṣẹ́ mọ́ gbogbo ẹ̀. So now it's easy to say, and it's even easy to from what or it's justifiable what the OPC did underground during that crisis in Warri that time. So I think it makes sense. This really makes sense. Ẹ ṣeun púpọ̀.
Okay, sir. Yeah. So, love it. Arábìnrin love it. Ẹ bá wa béèrè ìbéèrè yín.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
À ń gbọ́ yín
Yep.
yékéyéké.
Okay. My question is to Olabola and Dayo. Is some people that also claim Shekiri people migrated from Egypt. Can you guys shed light on that? And the name Alero, yes, it's given to the first daughter. As
Say that
much as
again,
it's
mi ò
hard,
gbọ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ dáadáa, tún sọ.
is this better?
Yeah, kind of.
Yes, I was saying some people claim that Shekiri people also migrated from Egypt. Can you guys shed more light on that? And the name Alero, yes, it's given to first daughters, but it's not necessarily given most of the time. Most people will identify you as that. Like same thing. Yeah, same thing they call my mom, yeah, Lero kind of thing. If you're identified as that, not necessarily given. It's just like a extra name or a nickname or pet name kind of thing sometimes. But some people do go ahead and give it to your kids, not necessarily um, has to be given to one, especially first daughter.
Okay, I'll go. So the migration from Egypt, and I'm going to take that part. Mr. Dayo may want to take it again in addition to the second part. But there is no such thing, and it's not unique to Shekiri. Some Igbos may say Egypt or even Israel. Some Yorubas say Mecca, Egypt, and Sudan, name it. Upper Nubia, and you would find this almost amongst all the subgroups in Nigeria. Almost, even outside of Nigeria, go to the Central Africa, you may find people parroting this narrative. But it is like the opposite of modern finding. It's the opposite of scientific finding. It's just like it has no basis in history. It has no basis in science. That's the reality. So the reality is that all these people, the Shekiri and the larger Yoruba people or Yoruboid now, um, emerged for the first time in that Niger Benue conference. That's where they emerged as an ethno-linguistic group. So prior to that, there was no such ethno-linguistic group as Yoruba, let alone the Shakiri. And then it's not only the Yoruba, it's the Igbo, it's the Nupe, it's the Egbira, it's the Kakanda, it's the Bagi, and some other groups like that. So that's the modern knowledge, that's the scientific information. No Egypt, it's from within that area called Nigeria. Okay, so where did this Egypt thing then come from? That you've now found it not only among the Shekiris, but amongst other Yoruba subgroups, among some Igbos, amongst like scattered all over the place, where it's rooted in the. We've trashed this again and again on this platform, so I can understand why I'm saying it again because you're coming here for the first time. So it's rooted in the Hamitic hypothesis, like African people as a whole. That's what the hypothesis says. We come from the Middle East somehow. And where is this Hamitic hypothesis coming from? From the Judeo-Christian scripture, which says, oh, there was a flood that killed everyone in the world, and a few people survived. One family, Noah. So one of his children gave rise then to the new people that would populate the modern world or the new world now. So that child is Ham. So that's the origin. That's the basis. That's not rooted in any scientific knowledge. It's contrary to science. It's contrary to modern knowledge. It's contrary to truth. So a lot of people have jumped on that narrative that there is no historical basis or scientific basis for. In fact, contrary to scientific information. So one of those people who jumped on that is Sultan Bello, sometimes in the year 1827. So he wrote a book keying into that narrative and said, "Oh, I want to write a history of all these people, Nupe, Yoruba, blah blah blah." And he wrote, "These people they came from Mecca. That one came from the blah blah blah." Or this one Yoruba came from Mecca and gave rise to the other people here, blah blah blah. So he wrote this book, and one of the greatest writers in Yoruba in our history, Johnson, jumped on that narrative from Hausa land and he propagated it until historians also followed through until historians thought, why are we following this narrative? And then why are we all searching the Middle East? Why are we searching Egypt? Why are we searching blah 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 for our origin? And then they traced back to find that, oh my God, this is coming not even from the Yoruba people themselves, but from a writer in Hausa land who got it not from the Yoruba people, but just make up the story based on the myths prevailing at the time, which are rooted in Judeo-Christian scriptures. So now historians ask the Yoruba people, now what do you people say about yourself? Since we've been mistaken all along, we've been asking someone else about you. Tell us what you say about yourself. And the Yoruba people gave something entirely different. Their original history before the myth from Hausa land permitted into their narratives. So what we say is that we are from this area, this part of the world. This is where we originated. So at least that's what the Yoruba people say about themselves. So does this mean historians are going to accept this as truth? Not necessarily. But at least they now know what the Yoruba people originally says. So then this has to be checked with modern information. And guess what? Modern findings seem to conclude that what the Yoruba people is saying is the truth. And then this has been, archaeology has confirmed it, and linguistics has confirmed it, and genetics seem to be confirming it as well, that these people originated from this part of the world. So there is no such thing as Egypt. It's just a narrative that is not unique to Shekiri. It's found among people, among you'll find it among Igbo. They will say, some will say Israel. Some Yorubas will still insist, even though historians say otherwise. But they don't know historians say otherwise. They read these things on blogs and all. They will say, "Oh, it's Egypt because I read it. One man, Omokri, said that, so he must be correct because he speaks good English." Oh, he's not an historian, so he's not necessarily correct.
Thank you.
Okay, alàgbà Ọlábọ́lá, ẹ jẹ́ ká máa bá ìtàn lọ. Ó dàbẹ̀ ní pé àwọn tó níbèrè náà nìyí.
Yeah, so Lovette has a second question, Mr. Dayo Shawambe. Me really
Oh
more.
yes. I am here. I think Lovet's second question was pertaining to the name Alero. Which I said that customarily the Ishakiri people name their first daughters. It's just like I think her question was, sometimes the names are given, sometimes the names are not given, but at the end of the day, even when the names are not given, people still refer to that first daughter as Alero or any of its variants, such as Urowali. Love it, am I right?
Such as what?
Such as Urowali.
Yes. But
Okay.
my question with that is, Wali, isn't that given to the other daughter though?
So Alero and Urowali they sound like two different names, but customarily these are names that are just given to like first daughters that are born, right? So it's not, there is no first daughter, second daughter, third daughter thing, which unless I'm not sure about, but customarily, these are names that first daughters are given when they are born. So I also mentioned Orode, which is another variant as well. So it could be Alero. It may not be Alero. It may be something else. It may be any of these other variants, right? So this custom is kind of similar to the way Igbo people always name their first daughter as Ada, right? Which means like the first daughter. Now, even if they don't name that first daughter Ada, if she's given another name on the grounds of the house or by endearing people, maybe family, or others, the daughter may still be called Ada, even when her name, given name, is not actually Ada. So it's just customary to call the first daughter that, even if that is not her given name. So they would say, oh, okay, she's the first daughter. Okay, Rowali, 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 or Alero, Alero, even if it's not her name. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, mostly. I was just trying to clarify because I know Momsy calls me Wali, but then I think it's semi-different from Wali. It's similar but also different. And one more thing, I know someone said something of Ipanilek or something. I don't know what that means. I'm trying to understand and follow through when someone says something in Yoruba, but I don't understand all of it.
Loveth, are you using your earphones?
Yes.
Yeah, because we are having a hard time hearing you. So if you would maybe want to speak louder, or disconnect for a while to pose your question, after which you can reconnect.
Oh, I'm not home. I told Alabola I'm not home, so I'll have to stay connected and I'll try to speak louder. But yeah, I'm trying to listen to the conversation and learn a couple of things from the room.
Okay, that's all right. Just I don't know if Mr. Olabola got your other question, because I could not hear you clearly. Or so if you would want to repeat the question, for so
Yeah,
um
you could text me while the conversation is going on. So you could just send me a DM. Sure, bro.
Thank you.
Okay, ó dàbẹ̀ ní pé Kemi also has a question. Kemi, you can ask your question, then after that we'll continue with the stories.
Okay. I heard. I didn't. I didn't know the person that actually said that Orowole. I think for the direct translation of Orowole is wealth has coming. So And in Yoruba land, I don't think that name is synonymous to a lady or I don't know, but the literal translation, if you want to translate in Yoruba language straight, it's just like what has come in Orowoli, because I have a friend who is from the riverine part of Ondo State, àwọn Ìlàjẹ Ẹsẹ̀-Odò yẹn. His surname is Orowoli. Orowoli la máa ń pè, ọkùnrin dẹ̀ ni. And surname, generally in Nigeria or in Yoruba land, belongs to a male uh, a male ancestor, kind of. So the correlation there seems to be, not clear to me as a person.
So, Mr. Um, Kemi, the name is not Orowole. The name is Urowoli.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So in Yoruba, Oro would mean riches or wealth, but it's Uro. Uro. Uro.
Okay.
Softness.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Okay, you can proceed, though, our speakers. Who is speaking next? Is it Mr. Dio now, or?
Yeah, Mr. Dayo.
Okay. So yeah, going to the settlement of Ishekiri land and the prevailing customs of the people about where they come from. So um in Ishekiri land there are some five communities which identify themselves as aboriginal communities, right? So what do I mean when I say aboriginal? This community claim to have been at their present location, right, before even the foundation of the Shekiri, or not the Shekiri kingdom, of the Wari kingdom, right? So most times when we want to tell the history of a people, we tend to focus on foundation of kingdoms, big names, one of them migrating somewhere, and all that. But these communities, amongst the Shekiri people, claim that they've been there before the foundation of Ishekiri, or not the foundation of Ishekiri, that the Ishekiri people have been existing in these communities aboriginally, before a Benin prince known as Ginua came in the 15th century. Ginua was the son of Obaolua, who migrated from the Benin kingdom and went to the riverine area to establish a kingdom amongst the people there. So these communities claim that before Ginowa came, with his entourage of 70 chiefs from Benin, that they've been there, he met them there, and then they accepted him to be their king, you know. And just like the way the Romans conquered, or the Romans took dominion over the Greek lands and ended up being civilized by the Greeks, they ended up speaking Koine Greek or Common Greek in the areas which they ruled. The Ishekiri people also claim that, when the royal party came, they took him and his people in and accepted him to be their ruler. However, they all ended up speaking Ishekiri language because they all melted in into the population. So these communities include Okotomu Irigbo, also known as Ude Ishekiri, the area where we call Ude Ishekiri now. Another one is Ugborodo. Ureju is the third one, Omadino is the fourth one, and Inorin is the fifth one. So these communities all claim descent from, various parts of Yoruba land to the west. Inorin, for example, claims to have descended from a little known town now, known as Odeomi. So Odeomi now is just a small Ijebu town. They had of recent there was this um, border arbitration case in court deciding whether Odeomi should be in Lagos State or maybe it should be in Ogun State. So it's in an area known as Ijebu Waterside. They are Ijebu speaking people, found very, very close to the lagoons and the creeks in that area. So Inorin claims to have descended from Lenoa of Odeomi. They say that's where they came from. Ugborodo has a connection to the Ugbos. The Ugbos, as we all know, are Ilaje people. So Ugborodo has a connection to Ugbos. So Ugborodo will mean the Ugbos that migrated downwards or downstream. So that would be Ugborodo. So they claim that somehow they have a connection to those people, right? So there are various other communities like that. Inori claims descendants from a man called Ogumaja. Ogumaja was also said to be an Ijebu, but they didn't mention specifically where Ogumaja came from. So these communities claim that before Ginoa came with his entourage, they've always been there. Now, this era, in the Shekiri people is known as the pre-Ginoa era. So this was the time when all these communities they had not yet coalesced, into a single kingdom known as the Wari Kingdom or anything. They were just living in their primordial independent communities as fishermen and just doing their things. But then history on the Benin side and on the Ishekiri side seem to, um, point towards a time when a particular son of the ruling king, Oba Olua, who reigned in the 15th centuries, in the 15th century, in that area, his son Iginoa was said to have, been born on the same day with another crown prince. And the Benin custom then was that the first child to cry, would be the one that would, end up being the Edaiken, which was like the king in waiting at the end of the day. However, I think um, Iginua and his brother were born at the same time, but Iginua did not cry. So the one who was born after him was the one who ended up crying. So, anyways, at the end of the day, Iginua had to migrate downstream with an entourage of 70 chiefs to establish his own kingdom. And that was how, at the end of the day, he found himself, amongst the Shekiri people who welcomed him. And sources from both the Benin side and the Shekiri side corroborates the fact that he was made king and he became the first Olu of the Ishekiri people at Ode Ishekiri. So that was how Ishekiri started out as a kingdom. So the Ishekiri king, would trace to the Benin palace, but the Ishekiri people would trace down to various, Aboriginal communities from Yoruba land that have been living in that area, since time immemorial. So yes, and also I wanted to mention that in Ishekiri, the supreme god is called Orishe, and we all know in Yoruba, Orishe would mean the source of all things. Like the same way we call gods in Yoruba, with the same way we call them Orisha. In Ishekiri, they call the god, the supreme god, they call him Orishe. So the same way you would have Oluwa this, Oluwa that, Olorun this, Olorun that. In the Shekiri culture, you would have Orishe Shola, Ushe Orishe, Orishe Laju, and some other names like that referencing God. So I just wanted to put that out there because in the first time I spoke about some commonalities in traditional religion, so that's also one commonality right there. So if anyone has questions about the foundation, I think Mr. Ola Bola also wanted to talk about how the Shekiri communities came about. So
Yeah, so actually I was gonna talk high level, not like very granular, because
okay.
yeah. So I was gonna talk about their local tradition, what it says, and what conclusions historians have reached from those traditions, and as well as also to comment on the succession tussle that is currently ongoing to the new to the throne of the new Olu. So their local tradition, the local tradition of the Shekiri people, seem to focus on the monarchical institution, not necessarily how they all first settled. Yes, Mr. Dayo has talked about how different groups come from different parts of Yoruba land, and yes, they've settled. So this distinction has to be made between the settlement and the kingdom. So, and usually a lot of people, most people conflate these two things. So kingdoms usually arise later, like very, very, very much later, after the people that settled for hundreds and usually thousands of years they've been there. In fact, the Shekiri people would have been there even before some of those kingdoms in Yoruba land were formed, because like what modern knowledge has found is that all of these people that settled in this part of the world, this Yoruba land up to Itsekiri land for many years, thousands of years. They've all settled. So yes, maybe some Yoruba kingdoms had formulated kingdoms prior to when Itsekiri kingdom would be founded, but they've all settled. So those people came, some elements came from Yoruba land, and those are the aboriginals. They call them the Umale. That's what the Itsekiri tradition called the earliest settlers, the aboriginal Itsekiri, Umale. And we can remember this name as the in Yoruba would mean Umole or Imole, the aboriginals, the earth spirits. If I will use this word for deities, for earth spirits in Yoruba land, but that's what they call the aboriginal people, the Umale. So those are the native Itsekiri people. So they've been there for years, and something happened in Benin Kingdom. Benin Kingdom is a little bit to the north of Itsekiri. When during the reign, so this tradition was collected and preserved in writing. The monarchical formation of the kingdom of Itsekiri was preserved by the chronicler from Benin Kingdom, Chief Jacob Egareva. So Chief Jacob Egareva collected Benin accounts about how the Shekiri kingdom was formed, and the Shekiri traditions agree with that. So it says that during the reign of Obaulua of Benin, and Jacob Egareba dated this reign to 1473 to 1480. So there is this Benin prince, meaning that Benin kingdom has had kings prior to when Ishekiri would have its first king. But then the Shekiri people have been there as settlers for thousands of years, just like every other people, just like Benin, just like other Yoruba groups. They've all been there for thousands of years. But apparently, the kingship began in Benin prior to when it began in Shekiri. And in our last talk, we talked about how kingship came from Ife to different parts of Yoruba land when they've all settled about the same time for thousands of years. So from Ife came this kingdom founding migrations in different waves to different parts of the Yoruba land where people had settled for thousands of years, just like Ife itself. So one of those wave of migration went to Benin. So the Benin people are a different aboriginal people. They are not Yorubas, a different ethnic group. So the only connection they have with Yoruba is that the kingdom, the kingship on them, the dynasty formed on them is a Yoruba dynasty. That's the only connection. Not that the people themselves are Yoruba ethnic group. So that's that about the Benin, also called Edo. So yeah, their kingship came directly from Ife, direct. So those who rule over them now are Yoruba people from Ife, even though there are revisions since the 1970s, and we've touched on how historians have dealt with that and trashed that to be a joke. So there's this Yoruba dynasty formed on them, and after a while, after some reigns, I can't remember the number of reigns they've had in Benin now, but they've had some reigns in Benin of kings, King 1, 2, 3, and so on. And there comes this reign of a king in Benin called Olua. And this kingship in Benin is one where you have primogeniture. So it has to be a dynasty. The son of this person becomes the king, and that's one son becomes the next king, and so on. It's not so democratic as it is in Yoruba land itself. And the reason for this is because this is a foreign dynasty now. So we're going to rule over foreign people. So it has to preserve that line. So during the reign of Olua, this prince was born, and his name is Iginowa. So this prince Iginowa is from Benin. And then some things happened, and Mr. Dayo has gone into the details of how he left and migrated down south a little bit and found these people who have been there, the Aboriginal people who call themselves Umole. Came amongst these Aboriginal Shekiri people, and he was embraced and allowed to form a kingdom amongst them. So, why did they accept him and all that? Historians have commented on the most likely reasons, and one of the reasons suggested by historians is that because these people, the Shekiri people, are Yoruboid people, or Yoruba as some historians put it, and the party from Benin is not one of the aboriginal people of Benin. Rather, is from the line of the ruling class of Benin, which are Yorubas themselves. So they accepted this party because they belong to the same group, identifiably Yorubas. So that's one reason that historians have identified. Maybe they accepted him because they are the same people. Are historians debating whether they are the same people? No, that's not what they are debating. They are the same people. That's fact. They are only saying this could have been the reason why they accepted him to rule, but it's not a conquest thing. So another reason suggested by some historians is like the nobility, the royalty, how he carried himself, and all of that, coupled with the fact that they are Yoruba, may have been the reason why he appealed to the Itsekiri people, who are also a Yoruba people, to have accepted him to rule and form a kingdom amongst them. So, long story short, Igunuwa became the first king of the Itsekiri. Hence, the kingdom of Ode Itsekiri was formed. So their kingdom was called Ode Itsekiri. The kingdom the Itsekiri people formed is Ode Itsekiri. So Wari seemed to be larger than the kingdom itself, in which other people are there. You have the Yoruba people, some Ijo and all that. So the king of Itsekiri would be and appears to be the most important king in Wari city. So that's why we call him the Olu of Wari city. Not necessarily that the Shekiri people are the only people in the whole of Wari. The Shekiri people's kingdom is Ode Shekiri. So as regards the language, I just want to comment real quick. I read a letter that was written by a certain bishop in the 1600s. So this letter was written from Benin, and this is a French bishop named Father Colombin of Nantes. So he was writing back home to the French authorities in France and was telling them of how the Benin area is very good for the missionary activity they wish to establish because of the weather and because the people are more likely to be persuaded to faith. So he wrote about how the language they speak is Yoruba. He wrote that their language is easy. He was basically citing reasons why this is a strategic location for the Christian mission. He said the weather is good, they can be easily persuaded, and their language is simple, Likome language, that is Yoruba language. So this informed historians to think, wait, if in the 1600s Benin Kingdom have Yoruba as a lingua franca, in addition to their own language, just like we have our local language today, and we have that language that we esteem so much, oh, English language. So that's how they have their language, the Edo Benin language, and they have the Yoruba language from the evidence of this Father Colombin, the letter he wrote in the 1600s. It says they have this language they speak, which is like Latin in Europe, just like how everybody speaks Latin, even though Latin is not necessarily their first tongue, just the way he put it. He said, just the way Latin is in Europe, these people speak Yoruba here. They speak Lekomin language, meaning they have their own language. So historians have said, okay, if these people speak this language in the 1600s, why would they have spoken Yoruba in the 1600s? What's the rationale for this? So the rationale seemed to be that this Yoruba language, which they speak, must have come from some 400 years before the 1600s. That's the Oromiyan time. So this must have been the Oromiyan influence in Benin Kingdom. That's the only possible explanation. So meaning that the Yoruba language has been there before the 1600s. In other words, the Iginua party who left Benin in the 1400s must have then been Yoruba, just like the tradition said. So historians concluded that, oh yes, he spoke Yoruba because that's who he is, and then he was accepted amongst the Shekiri because he's just the same people as them. So we have a different case in the Shekiri narrative from the Benin. In the case of the Benin, you have a people who belong to a different ethnic group, but the ruling dynasty on them is from another ethnic group, Yoruba. But in the case of the Shekiri, you have a group who is Yoruboid, or according to some historians, Yoruba. Yoruboid would mean that they are originally Yoruba, but they've absorbed so much input from those different people who surround them, the Edo, Yoruba, Ijo, to have almost formed a unique identity. So that's the clarification on Yoruboid. While some would say this absorption are not so significant to make them different from other Yorubas. Okay, so I'll be using Yoruba and Yoruba. So these people that settle, the settlers of Ishekiri, are Yoruboid. And then it is not a case of, oh, those who rule over them are not Yoruba. So we see that those who rule over them are not the Aboriginal people of Benin, but the ruling house of Benin, which is Yoruba itself from Ife. So in some, then we have that the whole Itsekiri people, the monarchy, the dynasty on them, and the people themselves are all Yoruba people. So I just wanted to clarify that. So my last comment would be on the succession tussle in Shakiri, and Lovett can correct me on some of the details if I'm mistaken here. So given the fact that we now see that the Shekiri people are Yoruba, whether the Aboriginal people, like the common people, or the ruling dynasty, all Yoruba, and we've seen their own testimony. I've cited Galway and I've cited Roth. They say we came from the West. They say we are connected to Yoruba not only in language but also in race. So this is their own testimony. We see the king. Now, this is not about just the people now. The king is saying, our father Oduduwa, that the Oni just ascended the throne. So we've seen their own testimony. And there are other testimonies like that online. Chief Oshodin would say, yes, Yoruba, that's our root, that's where we come from. And Mr. Dayo cited some specific places in Yoruba land where some of these Aboriginal groups came from. So we see that the whole people, true and true, and the kingship is Yoruba. So in 1979, there was this edict. I don't know the background to why they have that edict. So they formed this edict to say that in these are the conditions that should be met if a new for an incoming king of Ishekiri, that is the king of the whole Wari now, the most important king in Wari. So the king of Ishekiri should have so and so and so criteria, even though these requirements are not there from like the onset. It just happened sometimes in the 1970s. So what is one key criteria that's causing the issue now? The criteria is that the mother of an Ishekiri, of the incoming Olu of Ishekiri, the incoming king, should be Edo or something, one other tribe, but not Yoruba. It says the mother, particularly mother now, not just not the father. The father and everybody are obviously patrilineally Yoruba, but they're saying now the mother should be Edo. So this rule to them at the time seemed to make sense because on one hand the people are Yoruba patrilineally, but we also have connection to Edo somehow because the party from Benin who came is patrilineally Yoruba, but somehow has a maternal origin of Edo. So they said now, so to make things fair, because Shekiris are Yoruba somehow, and they are connected to other people apart from Yoruba, whom they are, so they're connected to Edo and other group, the mother should be from that group. So that was the rule in the 1970s they made. So now this rule has led to some rancor because the most preferred candidate for the throne is a prince of Ishekiri, of course, who is Yoruba, of course, because the people are Yoruba and the ruling house is Yoruba. But then the mother is Yoruba. So now they're saying, oh, wait, we can't. One party is saying, and this party is like the minority of the minority. And there is some reason why these people came up with that. They said, we can't allow him. Why? Because the mom is Yoruba, and there's an edict in the 1970s that says the mom should not be Yoruba, just to like balance things out because the people are already Yoruba, the patrilineal side. So the majority of the people say, well, that doesn't matter because we are Yoruba. So why should that? Yes, we made a mistake in the past, but now we have to correct that mistake, and we don't have to wait for the future to correct it. We are correcting this now. So, and they're saying that the fact that the mother is Yoruba should not disqualify because that would be denying our roots. These are the precise words of Oshodi of Shekiri and one other chief, and I mean most of the chief that advocate for the fact that the rule was mistaken. So they're saying the rule was mistaken in the first place because we'll be denying our root. The mother can be anything, provided that the father, I mean, he's a prince, which means he's from the Yoruba line. So yeah, so this is the back and forth now, and the case is in court, and somehow it's looking like everybody favors Prince Shola, and it's looking like Prince Shola will be crowned in August. You may want to add something, Lovett, at this point. I just wanted to like comment on the succession tussle and what the issue really is. I'm done talking. Lovett, are you there? Mr. Dayo.
Okay, so just wanted to say something about the 1979 edict of the Shekiri, um, which in which it was ruled that for any crown prince to ascend the throne of the Olu, the mother had to be either Ishekiri or of Benin stock. So Benin or Ishekiri. I think that was the. I think you just said Benin. You were trying
Yeah,
to
I was trying
remember.
to remember the second one, Itsekiri. Yeah.
Yeah. So the ruling was that the mom had to be Benin or Ishekiri, and if there was a prince, a potential prince who did not meet this criteria, whose mom was neither Benin nor Ishekiri, then the throne would pass to the brother of the prince. Until the next in line, the son of the previously disqualified prince, matures if the mom is Benin. And if there is no brother, to who meets this criteria, the throne would pass to the uncle, so the father of the deceased, of the preceding Olu who just died. And if there is no uncle that meets this criteria, the throne would pass to a cousin. So it just goes on and on and on and on and on like that. But like the baseline was that the mother of any Olu who was to ascend the throne was to be either of Ishekiri or Benin ethnic stock. So that was what the 1979 edict was about, which is actually causing some issues right now because um, Shola's mother is an Ijebu woman. So, is she an Ijebu woman or an Ondo woman? Yeah, Shola's mother is an Ijebu woman, I think. And the Olobo Shere of Wari, who in person of um, Ayiri Emami, is saying is leading some delegates to say, oh no, like because the king who just died actually, his son, you know, can also be claimed to be eligible to the throne, and his own mom is actually an Ishekiri woman. So they are saying Prince Shola's mom is not Ishekiri, so he's not qualified to be the king. But the majority of the people, are behind Prince Shola to succeed his father, who was the king before King Ikenwoli, who just died, you know, to take over as the next Olu. So yeah, just wanted to touch a little bit on that, all the succession issue going on.
Yeah, thanks. I also want to add that some of the argument that the people, like the vast majority of the people who obviously support Shola, they're saying this edict is a mistake that we have to correct. And in fact, we had cases where the mother was a Portuguese, for example, and they are kings. So why are we denying this guy because of some
Yeah, I
mistake?
mean, like even the first Olu Ginowa, his wife was an Ijaw woman, right, which he married out to Uru Selemo.
Exactly.
So his first sons, Ijijen and Irame, their mom was an Ijaw woman. So Olu Ijije, his mom was actually an Ijaw. So the edict was not a thing before. It was just a thing that was
Recently, yeah.
it's 1979, so it has no basis in history whatsoever. So it's something that was I don't want to say concocted in the palace by some chiefs. So but now the majority of the chiefs, I mean the same chiefs who came up with the edict, are now saying no, that edict was a mistake. Maybe because at the time politically it kind of suited their agenda. This was the era when the Shekiris were together with some other, the Urobos and the Benins in the Bendel states. So maybe at that time they felt like, oh, it would actually kind of favor us to pass this edict to protect the royal line in some sort of way. But now they're realizing, oh, actually, the chiefs are saying, no, 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 this is a mistake. Like, this is doesn't even sound right. So yes, they're kind of saying, they don't want to scrap the edict or throw it in the dustbin completely. They just want to they want to edit the edict to say the mother of the crown prince or the king of the next king, or anyone who wants to ascend the throne of the Olu, should either be Ishekiri or Benin or any of the various Yoruba stocks, of which Ishekiri itself is included. So that's what is going on.
Right. Can I read something from Loveth? So this was sent by her dad to her. So that her dad gives her an update on the succession, and also because her dad is like neck deep into in the palace and the activities. So it says yes, a little bit long, but not so long. Ishakiris are becoming less bothered as far as the process of the succession to the throne of the ancient kingdom of Wari is concerned. for they have reached a distance that can never ever be reversed. The Shekris has decided who succeed the ancient throne to the kingdom of Iwere Wari based on their conviction which favored the son of Atuashi II, that is the 21st king designate, Utieyinorishe Shola Emiko, who I no longer can address as prince or comfortably refer to Omoba, because immediately he returned from the Ijala Royal Cemetery where he has gone to perform the traditional burial rites of his predecessor, the Maestro Ogiame Kenwoli, who reigned as the 19th Ogiame. He, King Designate Shola Emiko, becomes the king awaiting to be crowned in the open. That is only but a ceremony, as the most important processes has followed and thoroughly done already. Those that still want to argue with the edict that has so confused them into being frustrated can go. And I think the chat continues, but that's the part I have. I thought I should share that with everyone. And that was from Love It.
That's interesting. I think that I have
Yeah, sorry. I'm unable to really speak, but there's like a longer post on Facebook about it that I will share to all our board. And you can share with
Help us to invite Auntie Ife. Good evening, everybody.
Auntie, if I can raise the hand, if she's here.
I'm not sure she's there.
If she's here, she can raise up her hand. Anyway, my question is that this particular edit that you're talking about, and I think it is very interesting. Like they would do that. Obviously, in a way, you could say it's an attempt to, like, we talk about self-preservation a lot. But I just wonder if they change the rule today because it's good for what they're trying to achieve today. What if in the future, 50 years' time, or maybe 100 years, and there comes a prince with a mom from, I can't imagine. So far, so good. Fulani seems to be the headache of a lot of Nigerians. Let's say that the mother is Fulani. What are they going to do that time? Because it always bugs me. Because I heard that in the north, they had an emir that his mother is Yoruba. I don't know, maybe the mother is alive or dead. But that was supposed to be the person that was supposed to be the emir of Kano. After they remove, was it before Sanusi?
Before Lamido was dethroned, so
Uh,
it was actually supposed to be emir, but politicking kind of made Sanusi become the emir. But the one whose mom came from the line of Ilorin was supposed to be the next emir.
exactly. Maybe that was Bayero or something.
Is it not the one they call Berebe?
So, and you can imagine what happened there. So I'm always dreadful of the day whereby we're going to be princes who are like that too in Yoruba land. So while it suits them today, I just wonder what will happen in the future when it doesn't suit them anymore. Would they be changing the rule that time? It's just my thought. I think Mr. Ola wants to talk.
Oh, yeah, so I want to clarify that the specific. Okay, so first of all, that rule, that edict of 1979, is not rooted in history, and it has some political motivation in 1979 to it. Secondly, the key thing they're changing now is that we cannot deny a prince just because the mother is Yoruba. That would mean we are denying our roots. So what the edict seem to be looking at is as follows. The people are Yoruba stock, the people and the kingship, the dynasty is Yoruba stock on the one hand. On the other hand, they are connected again to Edo in some ways. So they are now saying, for someone to be a king, of course you must be a prince, meaning patrilineally you are Yoruba. Now, to balance things out, the mother side should be Edo, the thought, and Ishekiri only, not Yoruba again. So the mother side, because you already have the Yoruba thing being the prince in the first place. So this is how they think, and this is how they are taught in the 1979. But now they are saying, wait, this is a mistake. We can't exclude Yoruba particularly from the mother's side because that's who we are in the first place. So they can still have their Itsekiri, Edo, that is for mother side, and Yoruba for mother side. So that's what they are editing now. So they have a restriction. The mother side is not just left open. They are saying we just can't take out the Yoruba. So now, if they successfully edit this edict, which is not rooted in history as such, they are saying now it is not only Ishekiri and Edo that is being in from mother side. They are saying Yoruba should also be there for mother side because otherwise that would be denying their root in some ways. So the fact that they are all Yoruba patrilineally is not sufficient excuse to remove Yoruba from the mother side. So a Fulani cannot be the mother and the guy will still be prince if they say only Yoruba, Edo and Shekiri should be the mother side for the prince. So they are not leaving it open. They are just like including Yoruba to the mother side and then closing it up, hopefully.
Hopefully. And I will hope that they will make such edits to a lot of Yoruba kingship lines because a lot of them, they've got some blood in them. But it's interesting. It's just interesting. Does anybody else have question?
I want to ask a question.
I think we can even play this harder. I don't want to take it to the discussion of the Harry and Meghan, but I think their own, in a way, it kind of fits because they have their succession lines kind of mapped out. But anyway, let me what you go on.
So now, this is what we are saying. This intermarriage something, was it not Queen Victoria that I heard she was allegedly killed because of her bloodline from Eastern Europe? So now, do we still have some Yoruba people, Yoruba king particularly? I mean Yoruba towns, or let me say cities, that the nonchalant, because I know a lot of them are nonchalant now, that they nonchalantly install somebody, maybe the mother is from a different root. Do we still have today that maybe the man mother is a descent of maybe Fulani or Igbo or something like that, or particularly those Mesu Jambas? Do anybody know of that? I want to know because I'm weary. I think this is something we need to always put in context because assimilation is a very big thing. Some people use it to come and wield power in future, and we must be very, very careful. Thank you.
I think, I mean, it's not to answer your question before Mr. Labola will answer or anybody. I just want to say, I think it's more of this self-preservation. You know, we Yoruba, I don't.
Oh, Madame Lola Agboimo, and I really want to hear
You're
what she wants
muted
to say.
also.
Oh, sorry. I'm just saying, like, Yoruba Obas. I've seen a Yoruba Oba that actually have Igbo mom. Like, the mom is Igbo, the dad is Yoruba. And I've seen, not Obado, a Bale, that his dad was actually Igbo. The mom is the Yoruba, you know. So I think we Yoruba, we just nonchalant, or I would just say maybe we are just too Libra. Maybe I don't even want to use the word Libra, you know. Maybe if we can even put this clause in our own royal institution, maybe that will even help us, because a lot of Omo are Leobas, and that's why they don't even have the interest of their people, because they are Omales, you know. They are not even true Yoruba. They are, you know, they are Amulumala ni won, you know. I just
There's
want to
one
say
that
that.
I heard recently that said Yoruba language is a local, is a cake also. I don't want to mention the name of the Yoruba. And that barrier to dirty.
Yeah,
àmọ́
well,
àmọ́ àmọ́ ọmọ àlè ni àmọ́.
èmi ò mọ ẹjọ́ ẹ sọ fún mi ò mo fẹ́ mọ tó sọ pé Yorùbá.
So,
ẹ
like
má wọrí ẹja fi
Oga
sílẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn.
in the case of
Oga Kemele, so
Yoruba, like
Ọ̀ṣun náà ti
Yoruba.
wá Ọ̀ṣun ni àmọ́ wọn. Àwọn náà sọ pé kán máa pọn ọmọ ìyá wa pé káwọn yẹn máa bọ̀. Àmọ́ wọn ẹ má wọrí.
That man is too reckless, very reckless and too dumb. I don't know the kind of human being he is.
àwọn
Okay.
ọba oníṣùwàṣùwà àwọn ọba oní goldstone lórí.
Huh.
So in the case of Yoruba, I think if because as we all know, Yoruba is a monolithic group, but then at the same time, the various subgroups that comprise Yoruba land all, we all have our individual uniqueness and differences. So I'm guessing the edict of if such a thing is to become reality, it would differ from place to place, right? Because some Yoruba kingdoms have histories of, like take for example the Itsekiri example, the Itsekiri case we're discussing in the room right now, includes the Itsekiris themselves and the Benins, right? You know, based on what is their history. So for Yorubas, various kingdoms would have different criteria, on what ethnic groups the mother of, or whatever the case may be, of the prince or anybody who's to be king would descend from. So I just want to say, like, for the Yorubas, it won't be one thing, for example, because Yorubas to the west would have history of interacting with Dahomians, Awon Egun, like the Aja people and the Fon and the Mahi people, you know. And let's say a Yoruba group in a place like Ifon, in Ondo State, for example, they've always had histories of mixing up with the royal lines of some of these people. Probably even have input of Edo people in there. So like I'm just saying, like, the criteria will differ from place to place to place to place to place. So like there will be like so many rules. I think the various kingdoms would just have to come up with what works for them based on what their history is, and exclude whatever tribes they perceive as being
Hey, are you from
potentially.
Ifon?
Sorry, who's that?
Banjo, are you from Ifon?
No, I'm not from Ifon, but I am from Owo.
Okay, I'm from Ifon.
Okay,
Just
Ifon Mima.
yes, and I'm from a royal family in Ifon. We are purely Yorubas,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No.
Just
No
to let you
problem
know.
about that, because yes, because even the.
Yeah, I get you though. There are a lot of people because it's a border town that shares border with Edo. Yes, I understand you, but you know,
Yes. Yes. Like
mm,
the
the
present.
dynasty remains in one family, kind of, and they still marry or war other parts from Mondo, but in Edo, mm, I really can't say. But it's patriarchal anyway. The man has to be from Ifon, which is Yoruba basically. You get, so even if it's outside the boundary, it's still the same culture, similar cultures. You get this is just we are just talking about geographical difference. It's not really cultural difference like that. So even outside Ondo State, we have Yoruba people. I mean, along that borderline, you get. So I understand what you're saying, that we intermarry, but it's not like outside the Yoruba race like that, like that.
Sorry, Ade.
Yeah.
So,
So
if a Yoruba person in Ifon, is it common for them to marry like a woman from, let's say, Edo, Benin, or?
My grandmother is half, not even half. My grandmother's mom is the one that is a Shekiri. You get, so, but it's you hardly see them intermarry. That's why I said some towns are on the other side. That's in Edo State. You get, which are border towns to Ifon. For the fact that they are in Edo State, doesn't mean they are not Yorubas, but because of how they've drawn the borderline and all that, you can say it's outside Ondo State. But I mean, the royal line, the dynasty is still very much Yoruba, very, very much Yoruba. That I know of. You get, and
so
we
I
share
did,
some
like, when I'm talking
common.
about intermarriage, like, I'm talking about historically. I'm not saying the present Oba or his dad or his grandpa, right? I'm talking
Mm.
like now we're going into deep history. right? So many of these borderline kingdoms have history of, impute from the neighboring areas, along the course of history. So let's say, for example, now there is this town in the same local government as Ifon known as Okeluse, right? So the present
Yes.
um,
Yes.
so the present Arujale Ojima of Okeluse, they have a very strong connection to Benin, right? Even if you see the regalia, I
Is
mean,
it Awujale? The title is Awujale.
no, not Awujale,
No, no.
Arujale. So the present Arujale,
Okay.
who is actually one of the youngest Obas to have ever been coronated, I think it was like 13 or 14 when it was actually in secondary school, actually, when his dad died. And in Okeluse, the kingship is by primogeniture, right? So the line goes straight down the paternal line to the son. It's quite unlike most Yoruba kingdoms in that, and more like the Benin kingdom in that regard. In Yoruba, the kingship usually
I
rotates.
wanted to ask that too.
Yes,
Yeah, that Okelusa that you mentioned, I saw that young king and the way
yes,
the dress and all that. It looks
The
it looks
Arujos were
Benin.
headed.
it's purely
It
The
looks
Arujos were
Benin.
headed.
So yeah, I mean it's Benin. So like and all those Ondo, nah, not even Ondo, all those Ifon side. Like sometimes even Owo when you see the Owo, the Olowo, the king of Owo, see the beads, the regalia, the sword and all that. There's some element of Edo kingdom or Edo kingship in it. So I just want to ask that question, like, because I don't think, because when they dress and all that, even during their coronation, you saw how they do it. I was like, okay, this is more than the Yoruba coronation style. Like, is
Uh,
it is it
hello.
is it out of Yoruba line or what?
Yeah.
Okay, please.
Well,
I want to. Okay, I'm actually from Itsekiri, and our king is Arinjale. I'm aware that Okeluse, their own title is this Harujale or what? And historically, we have a lot of ties, and even it's just that the language, they have some elements of Benin, sorry, in their dialects. So I don't know. I'm still looking for someone that can really explain that. We also share border, as well. We share border with this Okeluse. So I'm saying that there is Okeluse and there is Ise. Okeluse is in Ondo State, while Ise is in Ekiti State. So the title of our own Oba is Arinjale, while their own is Arujale. So I don't know if there's anyone that can shed light on that.
yeah. I know there is a history between Ise Ikiti and Okeluse. You know, I've heard stories from both sides, from the Okeluse side, saying that, you know, the Ise Ikiti people have a kind of, blood ties with them. Now, where exactly the interlinkages come in between the two towns, I am not exactly sure, because just across the border in Edo State, there is also a town known as Uhe. So that town, because in Benin culture, there is something known as family greetings, right? So every family has a greeting. That's how you would even know. It's one of the primary markers to identify who is a Benin person, right? So if you meet a Benin person today, for example, if you want to know, oh, are you Benin? He says yes. You would say, oh, okay, so what's your family greeting? Right? They have different family greetings. Like, for example, the Oba's lineage in Benin, they greet themselves Lamogun, right? So whenever anybody says Lamugun, to greet themselves, oh, this person is from the Oba's lineage, right? They also have other greetings like Delai Hair, Lavie Ken, and so many other greetings. Now, Okeluse in Benin, Okeluse, they have their family greeting, and Okeluse is a Yoruba town in Ondo State, right? But Amongst those family greetings unique to the Benin people, Okelusa is one of those towns that have a family greeting, but they don't speak Benin in Okeluse. So definitely there's a link between Okeluse and the Edo people. Because according to the Benin people, they say that town called Uhen. Uhen is in local government called Ovia Southwest. There's a link between that town and Okeluse, which is now in Ondo State, right? But then at the same time, the Okeluse people will also say that they have a link with Ise in Ekiti State, and the Ise people also do not deny that. They actually claim that their king has a sort of link with Okeluse. So I mean, there is a kind of like the entire area has intertwined history, so to speak. So which goes back to my original point that if Yoruba kingdoms were to pass this edict, it would differ from place to place to place to place. So because the different kingdoms have their own unique histories of who and what they've mixed with either now or in the past. So yes.
Okay, as regards the influence of Benin, you know, I mean, in let's say costumes of these kings. Now, the that particular area, including Ekiti, and I think some part of maybe Ijebu used to be under Benin, what's called
No,
kingdom.
they were not under Benin at any time. Just wanted to say
See,
that.
the thing is that there must be, for instance, now there's a place in Ekiti called Ikere Ekiti. They are close. In fact, they believe that their king Okuga of Ikere, they believe is from Benin, and he also wears Benin costumes.
See, the thing is, all the Eastern Yoruba kingdoms have very, very close interrelationships with Benin, the Benin royal house. So, be you Ikere, be you Owo, be you Akure, be you Ondo, be you all these towns, on the eastern flank. I think we already discussed this issue here. This we already discussed it at an earlier time when we said, the Yoruba cultural space can be divided into 4 areas, and the kingdoms within these areas tend to gravitate towards Oyo in the north, Benin in the east, Ijebu in the south, and I forgot what the western one was. So yes, all those, but the thing is, I'm not sure if Ijebu, like you said, like you were trying to say earlier, was a Benin vassal state or anything like that. And I think the person who interjected, that was also what the person was saying, that no, Ijebu was actually independent.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this before, but I know that we talk about the Yoruboid, or is it Yoruboid or something? The group, the group of Yoruba language. So is it the same thing? Because the reason why I ask, is it the same thing when we're talking about the Spanish group now? We know they speak Spanish in different countries, but they still see themselves as different people. They have different kingdom and all that. Even Spain conquered some people at one particular time. So now we're talking about Yoruba. Is it the same with the Yoruba, like the group of that Yoruba language? Like, okay, they speak Yoruba here, they speak Yoruba here. But does it actually make us one? Or so is it the language that actually connects us? Or culture, or like, because I asked her the Owo, I asked her about the Okeluse and all that. But if we look at these people's, if we look at the culture, even though people will say there is similarity between Yoruba and Edo, but if we look at their culture, if we look at it closely, like it's more of a Benin than it is of Yoruba. But we say, okay, they are Yoruba. Is it just by language? Is it by blood? Is it by culture? Or is it by, what is it by, like, or is it just by the subgroup? Or I don't know. I would like to know.
So, for someone to be called Yoruba or any ethnic group for that matter, two basic things like defines your ethnicity. Language is only one of them. So, anthropologists will call it will call ethnic groups ethno-linguistic group. So meaning it is your race and ethnicity, the original culture, not the one you later acquired in the course of history. So all this king of Ondo or somewhere dresses like Benin. These are not even up to 1,000 year old.
Mr. Ola, before you continue, please, can you relate it to with the Spanish I cite of? Like, you look at Mexicans, they speak Spanish. Go to Spain, they speak Spanish, but they see themselves as different people, even though they speak the same Spanish. You know, the Mexican, they say they have the Maya Empire, they have their own civilization. The Spanish have their own, and likewise, Argentina or other country that speak Spanish. You know, I just want just to look into that and maybe to explain. That's why I ask. Like, I want to understand.
Okay, so the Spain people that speak Spain in Mexico, I would understand that has something to do with Atlantic slave trade and conquest with conquest of other parts of the world. But Spanish people originally are in Europe. They only moved to this part just for business or conquest sake. So and the language diffused into the Aboriginal people. So that doesn't make those Aboriginal people Spanish. They are different people. So they speak the language, right? But it doesn't necessarily make them Spanish people originally. So that's why language alone is not a sufficient factor for the identity. So that's why anthropologists would say an ethnic group is actually an ethno-linguistic group from the original, from the get-go, ab initio, ethno-linguistic group. So all these people that has been classified by anthropologists are Yoruba. The reason why they are Yoruba or Yoruboid is that originally they have two things that makes them qualify to belong to this group and not to another ethnic group. What are those things? The ethnicity and the language, the original culture, not just share, and the language, the original language, not just share. So over time, people would borrow culture from those who are next to them. So if you live in Ondo and the people next to you are Japanese, for example, there is no way for 200 years, 300 years, some Japanese culture and influence would flow in here, and some Yoruba influences would flow into Japan if they were living side by side each other. So that's why you see all those Bini thing here and then Owo thing there, because these people are living in what historians call the frontier region. So imagine
Sorry,
Yoruba
Mr.
land.
Ola.
Yeah.
When you say ethnicity, what do you mean by ethnicity?
Their original culture, they have their own worldview, how they see God, for example. So we see God in this way. They have their own mythology of origin. Oh, this is how we originated. They share all these things originally. So that's their ethnic values. So, and then the language is originally the same thing. So, ethno-linguistic is what makes them the Yoruba people. They have that ethno-linguistic identity. So then you have the Edo people who have another ethno-linguistic identity side by side with them. So they are living almost as neighbors in that frontier area. So if you imagine Yoruba land as a box now, on the right side of the box you have the frontier Yoruba people, those Owo and all those people we're talking about, and next to them is the Edo people. So there is no way there must have been cultural borrowing. These people interact with each other for hundreds, not even hundreds now. Before kingdoms were formed, all these kingdoms were formed maybe around 1,000 years old now, 1,000 years ago from now, but less than, a little bit less than 1,000. So these kingdoms were formed around those times. But before the kingdoms were formed, the people have been there for thousands of years. So imagine people living next to each other for, say, let's just say 2,000 years. There is no way next to each other in a frontier area, borrowings must have happened both ways. So that's why you see one person talking almost the same way, but then they belong to this part more than to that part. You see dressing, you see a lot of things going back and forth between them. In fact, an Owo prince would have to live in the Benin palace before he becomes king. So these are borrowings, and relationship must have happened. And to make everything even more interesting, to give it more nuance, the Benin kingship came outside from Yoruba land, around central Yoruba land, Ife to be precise, and went to establish a dynasty. So they, first of all, they see themselves as brothers from Ife. That's how they see themselves, regardless of where they are, frontier or not. The Benin people and these people on that frontier, not the people now, sorry, the Benin dynasty, not the people. So Benin dynasty and the people of all this frontier or Akoko and all those, their dynasty or their people, they see themselves as brothers from Ife with the Benin dynasty. So that's on one hand, relationship. And on the second hand, they've been there together for thousands of years, and there must have been exchange of cultures back and forth. So it's not only happening in that frontier, it's happening also on the western edge of Yoruba land. If you go to the left, you will see that cultural borrowing between the Yorubas living on the west, the left-hand side of Yoruba land, and the Aja people. And Mr. Dayo has touched on this. So the Aja people, the Egun, you will see some flow, almost blurred. In fact, historians are usually confused on what to categorize the Badagry kingdom as. Is it an Egun kingdom or a Yoruba kingdom? They are very confused because things are just like they speak in the palace, they don't say Kabiesi, they say something like Awe or something like that along those lines. And then they speak Yoruba and then they speak Egun. And then in their history, they mention that we are from Ife. And then they have some history of how they are from Aja people at the same time, you know. So when in frontier areas where you are living side by side people, not for 100 years, not for 200 years, but for 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 years, there must have been those blurring along the frontiers. If you go to Oyole in the northern part of that frontier again, you will see those kind of blurring a little bit. If Oyole was still there, present up till now, with the Nupe, you have, and it's from historians have commented and said, the earliest families in the original Oyole had some Nupe component in the family, even family, royal family, one name, one bed. So you have those blurrings along those lines. Bariba, you have a little bit of those ones too. So that's what you find along those margins, those boundaries, those frontiers, whether it's for the Edo people on the eastern frontier, or for the Aja people and the Yoruba on the western, or for the Oyoile people and the Bariba in the northern part. You will find those blurrings everywhere. Why? Because they've lived next to each other for thousands of years. And again, why? Because the Benin kingdom, particularly the dynasty of Benin, claims to be brothers with the people of these Yoruba people living next to them. They are brothers from Ife. Not the Benin people now, but the Benin dynasty and the dynasty and people of the Yoruba kingdom. So that's why
So,
you have this
Mr.
borrowing.
Light, this ethno-linguistic grouping, like, when was it done exactly? Because there has been perspective before this grouping of describing Yoruba people this way. Like before, like people used to like identify more with Oyo, Ijebu, and all this type of things. So, like, when was this ethno-linguistic grouping of peoples?
So when I say ethno-linguistic grouping, I'm not talking about the people themselves, the local people saying, oh, we have this ethno-linguistic group. They must have identified themselves in some cultural ways as belonging to a larger family of Oduduwa. But these are linguists and historians coming to study languages, see the commonalities in their language, see the commonalities in their culture, extrapolate back in time and say, oh, these people belong to the same group as they have claimed. So they only claim that we are brothers. That's the most they can say from their own traditions. We are brothers. Yes, we have dialect Oyo. Yes, we have dialect Ife. Yes, we have dialect Ijebu. But they still see something amongst themselves. Leave experts out of this now. They still see something and say, wait, we are brothers. We have some kind of culture that connects us to a place. That this person is our father. That this is our myth of origin. They have that thing. So now these things that they have seem to be corroborated by what experts have found. And they said, yes, based on the analysis of your material culture, based on the analysis of your language, you belong to one group. Yes, there are some internal differentiations, but those internal differentiations are only sufficient enough to differentiate you into dialect of the same language, are only sufficient enough to differentiate you into subgroup of the same ethnic group, but not sufficient enough to differentiate you as a different ethnic group. So if you pick up any history book, for example, you would find, I mean, read some of those parts from history books like A History of the Yoruba People by Professor S. Adebanji Akintoye and Professor Gudin's book, which was just published in 2020. You would find this analysis. So Yoruba people are Yoruba people by virtue of the ethnicity and the language. So the other group, the Edo, for example, it's another ethnic group, but they are living side by side some particular Yoruba people. And who are those? Those are the Yoruba people who live on the eastern frontier of Yoruba land. So they've lived there for thousands of years on one hand. So these are the reasons why you find borrowing back and forth. And on the other hand, they claim to be brother from Ife. Not with the people of Benin now, but with the dynasty in particular. So that's on one hand, and Mr. Dayo has said that. Another thing I want to touch on is the dressing that we and the the article of the kingdom that we see and we particularly name, oh, this is Benin. Usually some of these things are actually Ife. For example, the Ada, they call it Ada in Benin. We call it Ada in Yoruba land. You see that sword that is curved. It originated from Ife, and then it was dispatched all over Yoruba land, especially the classical kingdoms of Yoruba land. I'm not necessarily saying anywhere you find them today is coming directly from Ife. Some would have gone to Ife and then would have gone to Benin from Ife, and then because of Benin influence and borrowings from Benin, they would adopt it because they are near those Yoruba kingdoms. But some came directly from Ife to other Yoruba kingdoms, for example. So if you PTR, this what you find in my DP is the oldest archaeological find of the Ada and the Eben, the one you find in Benin. So the oldest that is ever found anywhere in Nigerian region is found in Yoruba land, somewhere close to Ife. So that corroborates the tradition from Ife that, oh yeah, the kingship, whether the Ogiso, as we've seen the last time we discussed, came originally from Ife, the Ogiso, at least the first three. And Benin tradition said, yes, this Ada and this Eben that we have was introduced by the second Ogiso. So these are things in Yoruba land, for example, we call the Ada Ada, yeah, they call it Ada as well in Benin. In Yoruba land, the other one that looks like a leaf, we call it Abere. Some dialects call it Akpe, some call it Ato. If you go to Benin, they call it Ebe. Although I saw a Benin account that was recorded sometimes in the 1800s, they call it Ebere. Yeah, not the Eben that they call it today. So from the Benin, so that account was collected from the Benin people. Like, oh, what do you call this thing? And they said Ebere. But today they call it Eben. But the name of Ebere seemed to be closer to the Yoruba name that we call it Abere. So I'm just saying that some of the things we see today that the Benin have cherished and preserved so much that we seem to think it originated actually did not originate, and they originate from Yoruba land. And there's a lot of narrative like that. But the bottom line here is that people borrow. So when you see, oh, it could just be borrowing. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the prince is from there. It could be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's just borrowing between people. Over time, they lived side by side. The languages must have influenced each other. And some of the cultures that we call their culture today must have been influenced by borrowing back and forth between kingdoms.
So what are these things that you're showing up there? What are these?
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna. So if you click on that, I
I
labeled
was
them
about
one,
to
two,
ask
three.
the same question.
I labeled them one, two, three. So this is carving on rocks somewhere in Agidi farm site near Ife. So if you see that carving number 2, for example, this carving number 2 is what we call what you see with the Benin Kingdom called Abere. They call it Eben. I don't know if you guys have seen it. So and it's the same thing you see in carving number 1. And you see the same thing in carving number 4. To that belief, yeah, the battery. And number 3 is the curved sword, but it's turned upside down. If you look at that number 3, who are shaped upside down, and the other ones are not relevant to the discussion I'm making. So what I'm just saying is that those things that you see in Ondo, for example, people would necessarily think, oh, looks like what we see in Benin. Oh, this must have come from Benin. Yes, maybe, but I'm just saying necessarily it doesn't have to come. In fact, it was originally dispatched from Ife, and it is still being used in Ife till date, even though most people are not aware. And this is just to say that the oldest archaeological evidence that shows that people are using these symbols is found in Yoruba land. There is nowhere in which you will find any evidence of anything older of these particular articles
Oh, so
the
these are
dynasty.
carvings of tools
Yeah, carvings of
that were
those
made
on
on the
rocks,
rocks
and
and
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think for you to recognize what are on those, I'm not sure if it's a clay base on which those things are carved on, but you need to know what the Ada and the Eben, you need to know what they look like to recognize them in the picture, right? So if you Google Ada and Eben, you would actually see here.
Exactly.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
So Google, yeah. Thank you. So
yeah.
if you Google, you can compare the images with what I have in picture number. Let me see what number is that. Number 1, 2, 4 is the same thing, and number 3 is the curved sword. And yeah, so Ife claims, and we dispatch these to all. In fact, in Oyo Kingdom, the tradition says that the Ada Oromiyo came with it to Oyo. And for the installation of a new Alaafin of Oyo, the sword would have to be taken back to Ife for reconsecration. And it's one of the essential rites of the installation of an Alaafin. So Adayeni, Ada Oromiyo, and the Ada has been in existence anyways before Oromiyo, but because Oromiyo introduced it to Oyo, um, the Oyo dynasty, so it's called Ida Oromiyo in Oyo. Yeah.
And again, another evidence is based on the fact that, this royal insignia that is associated with the Benin Palace now, that they call the Ada and the Ebe. The Ada is the royal. It's sickle shaped. It's the royal symbol of authority. Whenever you see an Oba, you know, you would see the attendant behind the Oba holding the Ada, right? But Yoruba is the only language in the surrounding area that calls any such thing Ada, right? In the Edo language, it's not called Ada. A cutlass is called Opia.
Thank
So
you for that.
Benin's don't call a machete or a cutlass. They don't call it Ada. Yorubas are the ones that call it Ada, right? So in Benin language, it's called something else. So, and also like Olabola already said, the Abere, which is what Yorubas call a fan, right? And the Eben, which
You mean
they also
Abebe?
Abere,
it's a
Abere.
Abere, it's a dialectal thing, right? Some
Oh,
would say Abebe, some would say Akpe, like Olabola already said, also, right? Because I think in Ife, where these royal symbols of insignia came from, I think probably that was what they called it at the time, right? It's fan shaped. If you Google the Eben, you would see that it's fan shaped, right? That particular one, it can be given to any chief. Any chief carries that one. It's just a kind of like stamping of office from the
Right.
palace, but like only recognized kings carry an Ada. So there was one particular time when Oba Arakale of Akure, right, actually carved a wooden Ada for himself, right? And the news got to Benin that Oba Arakale of Akure had already carved himself an Ada. So the news got to the Oba, and the Oba sent an entourage to the Akure Palace, telling Oba Arakale to bring the Ada to him, that he had no right to carve an Ada for himself. And Oba Arakale sent a reply and told the Benin king that he had the right to carve an Ada for himself, but the only thing was that his Ada was made of wood, whereas the Benin Oba's Ada was smelted from a sort of metal, probably iron or copper or bronze, right? So he wasn't trying to usurp power or anything, but at least he had the right to carve himself an Ada, right? And then the Oba sent an entourage back to Akure saying no, he should actually send the Ada over to the Benin Palace, and the Oba refused. And I think, a kind of scuffle occurred, and Arakale had the entourage from Benin beheaded, right? And that was the actual cause of the Benin Akure War, in which the Ishekiris, which we are actually discussing right now, participated in that war, right? And that was actually what led to the foundation of a town that in Edo State we know now as Olugbo, right? So Olugbo is a town in Benin close to the Delta State border. It's actually occupied by Shekiri speaking people, but it's in Delta State. It's in Edo State. Story for another day, because there has also been sort of scuffles in that area in the past, saying, oh no, we are not Edo people, blah 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 blah. So yeah, the Eben is a symbol, and even now you would find that Eben across various kingdoms of southern Nigeria, right? Which dispersed is a secondary. The secondary point of dispersion for those would be Benin. So from the Benin kingdom, it got to the Urobos, it got to the Western Igbos, right? The Igbos of the Delta states. It got to some Ijo clans also carried out Eben and the Ada, and it also spread around to so many other areas. But like Olabola was already saying, the original point where it came from would be from Ife, because even during the coronation rites of the present Oni, you would see that when he came out with the Ade Are, he also brought with him an Ada out when he came out from seclusion, right? And he said, according to what Ogunwusi said, he said, these are the artifacts that have been passed down to me from my fathers to my fathers to my fathers to my fathers and down to me. So yes, and like he said, he has already supported it right now with archaeological evidence that the oldest dated artifacts that depict the Ada and the Eben as insignias, right, can actually be traced back to somewhere near Ife.
Thanks for that wonderful summation. Yeah. I also heard, I don't know how true this is, that okay, so I know this one that is true. So the king of Benin would come to Ife for confirmation, even in modern times. At least the social media has the picture and video evidence of the last three, the present one, the king before, and the king before that one. I'm not sure there is photography and videography prior to that person, but yes, we have those three captured. In fact, the present one, if you Google King of Benin visits Ife on Channel's YouTube page, you would see the commentator, the Channel's TV commentator, saying yes, he came to visit as a thank you visit, so to speak. But then the first port of call is the Palace of the Oni of Ife, where he also paid homage to certain Benin kings believed to have been buried there. So that was the wording that was used by the Channels TV commentator. And then it's also said, rumor also have it. So the first one is not rumor now because it's reliable from a China's TV that was present on ground. So rumor also have it that it would have to, just like the Oyo case, where he would have to like reconsecrate his Ada, he would also have to do the same thing as the Oromiyo Grove. And I heard this particularly from one of the gatekeepers at the Oromiyo Grove who said, I was here when the Oba of Benin came in here and so and so and so was done to him here and so and so and so was done to him there. I just wanted to like put that out there.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if there's still more stories to tell because this is supposed to be history of the Itsekiri people and other Yorubas. Um, I don't know if that's all we got tonight. Maybe it's just a very short and sweet story. Our speakers, is there any more stories before we go on to ask questions?
I think AB has a question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sent the questions to you and Ola the back channel. So if you just check, you see the question. And the last one is like more of sarcasm or like joke. Like I've been hearing so many things. Like the present day Nigeria with the number of ethnic groups and languages we have. Is it fair to say that the Tower of Babel, the story of the Tower of Babel that we read about in the Bible, should we say the Tower of Babel started in Nigeria, or that's where God said we should go our separate ways? Like with so many ethnic groups that we have in Nigeria, is it not fair to say let everybody just go and follow their ethnic languages and make nation out of it, even if it's going to be 250 new countries? At least we'll break a record of adding 250 countries to the present day countries that we have in the world. Like that's what I have to. But if you check like your back channel, you see the main question that I asked.